So when you fast and starve your cells of energy, your cells work more efficiently and you upregulate repair processes like the highly regarded autophagy. However, welcome to part 5 of the multi-part series on favorite podcast highlights from the B.rad podcasts. And now, finally, we get to the juicy, interesting, compelling, possibly controversial topic of diet and some of my favorite guests and checkpoints over the years. So I'm going to call this the animal-based, protein-centric, nutrient-dense, fully fueled, quote, meat and fruit style diet that I've landed upon today after much experimentation and deep immersion. And so I want to hit some of my favorite guests and some of the big highlights. And we're going to go back to 2019 and remember the show with Dr. Paul Saladino. And that was when he was first rising and really driving the popularity of the carnivore diet movement and all its eventual iterations. Dr. Sean Baker, one of the big drivers back then as well. But the compelling premise was presented. Paul did a great job on our first interview together. We had two. He said, look, animal products, point blank, have the most nutrient density, especially animal organs, eating in a nose to tail fashion, which unfortunately today, when we talk about meat, we usually focus on the muscle meats and neglect the organs. But it is without dispute that organs are the most nutrient dense foods in the human diet. You may not like that insight, or you may have moral objections to eating animal organs, or you may think they don't taste good, but it's undisputable. You can have some fun Googling a term like liver versus kale and look at a detailed micronutrient breakdown between the so-called plant superstar food of kale and a slice of liver, and there's absolutely no comparison all the way across the board. So this is impossible to dispute that animal products have the most nutrient density, and it's also impossible to dispute that the consumption of animal foods and the access to ever more nutrient-dense animal foods was the key driver of human evolution and our ability to branch out from our ape cousins and grow large brains and rise to the top of the food chain. So, animal products have been the centerpiece of the human diet for the last 2 million years, and Dr. Saladino calls plants, quote, survival foods or incidental foods when we are not succeeding with catching our fish or hunting down the bison. Dr. Sean Baker had a memorable quip on this subject when he said, look, if our ancestors were able to take down a woolly mammoth, that's like 3 million calories. Everyone is feasting on the mammoth for weeks. They were not going to bother scrounging around for what little plant matter they could eat when they were feasting. So when they were unsuccessful, we received this argument that plants were the backup foods rather than the distortions that we might have today that humans are meant to consume a plant-based diet. Or a friend sent me a recent another headline story saying, taking a break from meat for a few weeks will give you all these health and longevity benefits. This is flying in the face of the single most scrutinized, longest, and most severe scientific study in history, that is human evolution. So apply your morality and your modern day rigid values and beliefs on top of this insight, if you will. But animal foods are what drove human evolution and make us who we are today. Interestingly, furthering the point, Dr. Saladino comes out swinging with the also undisputed assertion that plants have defense chemicals that can be toxic depending on your sensitivity. We're very familiar with the toxicity and the irritation caused by consuming gluten, as well as people with peanut allergies or dairy allergies that react poorly. And along this spectrum of the plant defense chemicals, it's very obvious to realize, for example, when we react to spicy foods with the stinging of the mouth or the tongue, and we slice the onions, and it makes us cry. And isn't that cute? It's important to reflect on what's going on here. So the plants have the defense chemicals because they are unable to run away from predators to be cutesy, but it's also a highly valid insight from the world of botany. The plants are making these chemicals to ward off predators because they don't want to be eaten. Okay, so what happens when you consume these plant toxins? You can often get a health boost because when you consume these natural defense chemicals or anti-nutrients or antigens as they're called, the body will mount an internal antioxidant defense response, thereby prompting the net health benefits. So it's not that the kale smoothie or the handful of blueberries have a bunch of antioxidants that you're swallowing these antioxidants down your throat and going into your body. What's happening is these plants, the poisons, the natural poisons contained in these plants, are prompting your liver to release the internally produced antioxidants like glutathione, like superoxide dismutase, and catalase. Those are three major internal antioxidants. They're very powerful, they're very potent, and you do get that net health benefit when you consume the quote, high antioxidant blueberries. However, the important insight to take away and the understanding that it took me a long time, over 50 years of my life, I did not realize that the high antioxidant bowl of blueberries or the high antioxidant kale smoothie was not literally that you were consuming that, but rather that it's prompting the antioxidant defense response. The important takeaway here is that these plant toxins can also come with adverse side effects to those who are sensitive, such as the example of gluten, peanuts, dairy allergies, where people have the extreme reactions that mess with your overall health. Generally speaking, what happens with the sensitivity to various plant toxins is they irritate the very delicate lining of the digestive tract, and you get the condition known as leaky gut syndrome. This was basically unheard of. The term was, and the understanding was just not there as little as 10 years ago, but now it has emerged to be a centerpiece of modern medicine and progressive health practices. Gut health, in essence, is protecting that lining of your gut and nourishing your gut with healthy, friendly bacteria that go and populate in your colon and help counterbalance, counteract the adverse effects of the unfriendly or the quote bad bacteria that can often prevail when you have things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, or the various infections and acute illnesses where the bad bacteria starts to prevail. So we want to have healthy gut environment, healthy gut flora, and healthy gut lining. And by and large, many people in modern life, due to the nutrient deficient processed foods diet with the chemicals, preservatives, and also seemingly innocent and seemingly helpful plant foods that have these natural toxins that you react to. The most offensive categories of plant foods are those that the plant wants to have maximum defenses because it represents the essence of the plant, like the root, the seed, the stem, or the leaf is the plant. So when you pull a leaf of kale out of the ground or anything that's a seed, so that includes nuts, seeds, wheat, the gluten in the wheat, these are the things that have the most defense chemicals, the most protected part of the plant. In contrast, the least defensible part of the plant would be the final offering of fruit because the fruit plant, the blueberry bush, wants those blueberries to be picked and consumed, and then the creature, maybe the human, not these days, but what happens is those who consume these plants will poop out the seeds elsewhere, and the plant will flourish. Again, this is survival of the fittest, evolution as applied to the world of botany. So the apple tree wants the apples to be eaten. The blueberry the entire fruit category, right? They want those seeds to find their way elsewhere so more mango trees can grow over millennia. So the fruit is the least objectionable type of food to eat in the plant kingdom because it has very minimal natural toxins. You don't hear a lot of people who are allergic to blueberries, blackberries, apples, and what have you. Maybe some people, but for the most part, the potentially most offensive categories of plant foods are roots, seeds, stems, and leaves, especially when consumed raw. And over the eons of human evolution and especially civilized life, humans have learned to soak, sprout, ferment, and cook variety of plant foods in order to make them edible, right? If you go to a cashew tree and pick off a cashew nut, open the shell, and eat it, it's poisonous. So most foods that we eat, olives, if you're familiar with harvesting olives, they need to be treated with a very powerful. You put them in lye. My mom used to make it from our olive tree in our front yard, and it was like a big sign she wrote with a skull and crossbones. Don't reach in for these olives because they're still being treated and fermented by the lye in order to neutralize the toxins of reaching up and grabbing an olive off a tree. You can also reference how terrible plants taste in raw form, many plants, until they are soaked, sprouted, fermented, or cooked. And by doing so, you neutralize the plant toxins not only to make them edible, non-poisonous, but also easier to digest and less objectionable. So we have broccoli, also a superstar food with the highly touted antioxidant sulforaphane in high amounts. And if you take raw broccoli seeds, you're getting one of the record-breaking highest antioxidant foods, but it also has the highest levels of this natural plant toxin called sulforaphane. So if we were to steam broccoli for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or 12 minutes, that soggy 12-minute limpy, drimpy broccoli that you coat with butter and chewed at the awards banquet, that is going to have the least amount of plant toxins, also the least amount of nutrition, right? The longer you cook something, the more you degrade the nutritional value. So it's sort of like a trade-off when it comes to consuming plants, is you want to find the least objectionable plants, especially if you have symptoms of distress relating to the consumption of natural plant toxins. And this might include gas, bloating, indigestion, digestive distress, elimination irregularities in association, most likely with the most objectionable foods that we consume, which are from the plant kingdom with those natural toxins and the continuum between consuming something raw, which again has the highest nutrient density, but also the highest levels of natural toxins versus soaking, sprouting, fermenting, and cooking. And especially when it have the category of fermented foods, these are widely touted as super health beneficial. You get the probiotics, the beneficial bacteria in things like sauerkraut or kombucha or yogurt, and a very lower level of objection due to potential natural plant toxins. So when I have my sauerkraut and enjoy it, that compare and contrast to consuming raw cabbage or minimally stir-fried cabbage, which used to give me all kinds of digestive distress, gas, bloating. I continued to consume it. I wasn't really pinpointing that my wonderful stir fries that I used to make for myself and my family, which tasted good and looked good and they were very colorful, but also were delivering a high dose of plant toxins. Again, carnivore diet has come out of the gate with a really aggressive message and a really offensive message, especially to the plant-based community. So we have these wars going on between people touting peace and plants and plant strong, like my boy Rip Esselstyn. But again, it's on that spectrum of how sensitive are you. So if you have really fantastic overall robust health and an excellent gut lining and minimal sensitivity to these natural plant toxins, you can go and enjoy your kale smoothie oriented life with minimal adverse effects and perhaps enjoying and experiencing the health boosting benefits from consuming these high antioxidant foods. Now that you listened, you know that I have that term in quote marks forevermore. But if you do have a history of digestive distress or an assortment of autoimmune or inflammatory conditions, it is highly likely that you can make a correlation, draw a correlation to the foods that you consume in your diet. Of course, the junk food is nasty in so many ways and will irritate the gut lining and cause problems. But that kale smoothie or that a spinach salad with almonds, with spinach and almonds being two of the highest oxalate foods, which can irritate the digestive tract and cause kidney stones and things like that. This is when you got to start looking and paying attention to the message that is being that is the centerpiece of the carnivore community. And when you go on the websites, the organization that Dr. Baker is involved with, I believe it's called meatheals.com. You have all these amazing success stories from real life people that suffered from debilitating psoriasis for years and decades, or digestive distress, or colitis, gastritis, anything with itis that was tamped down and regulated and recalibrated with dietary intervention when prescription drugs and other interventions simply don't work. So it's a huge deal, and people are experiencing amazing healing, and so we can't just dismiss it out of hand. Unfortunately, like many fads, the carnivore premise was taken to the extreme and often blown out of proportion. Even Dr. Saladino himself, writing his book, The Carnivore Code, and for a while, again, when he came out of the gate swinging, I was impressed with his emphatic argument and explanation of the natural plant toxins, but he was advocating for eating only animal foods. So, like a zero carb, highly ketogenic diet featuring steak, some salmon, and some eggs. And again, if you're needing to do an experimental intervention to deal with inflammatory or autoimmune conditions, there is very likely a justification for consuming non-offensive foods for, let's say, 30 days at a minimum, and seeing how you do with a diet of salmon, eggs, and steak, and noting whether your gastritis, your arthritis, your chronic bowel irregularities, all kinds of these things regulate. And that's when you can start to do the detective work and then gradually reintroduce the least offensive foods and seeing what you can tolerate and what you can't. And at the top of that list, like I said before, would be carbohydrates in the form of fruit and honey, because they have little to no objections in terms of the defense chemicals. So Saladino, to his credit, has transitioned from an extreme carnivore strict eating pattern to recommending and touting the benefits of getting those carbs in the diet for a variety of reasons, including nourishing and fueling a high performance active lifestyle. So the fresh fruit, the raw honey, I also believe he's going in with raw dairy, and maybe there's some other categories that you can tiptoe over if you're an extreme example of having gone into a carnivore pattern and now realizing that the carbohydrates would do you well. And I have a chart on my website. It's free, bradkearns.com. Download the B.rad Nutrition Guide, new and improved and revised, where I have a tiered ranking system of the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth. And it starts at the top with meat and fruit and goes down from there. And there's a category at the bottom of a variety of different plant foods that can be really nutritious, delicious, a great addition to the diet with minimal objections in the realm of the plant toxins, especially found in the roots, seeds, stems, and leaves. So those are the ones you really have to be careful with. And yes, that includes nuts. So a lot of people have nut allergies, as we know, and that's just another example of how personal preference, personal sensitivity will guide your eating decisions. But starting with meat and fruit, by the way, coincidentally, these have been the centerpiece of human evolution for 2 million years. And you've probably heard of the research with the Hadza, the modern day hunter-gatherers from Tanzania. They're still living in a primitive manner. They're some of the last folks on the globe that are, living in this isolated manner, unfiltered are undiluted by modern technology, although that's getting changing every single day because they live like a day's walk from a convenience store where they can get a 7 Up and pick up a radio to listen to the World Cup and their country playing. But for now, there is some ability to study what hunter-gatherer life has been like for 2 million years. And one of the interesting insights that came out of it was how good these guys are at detecting the location of a beehive, and they'll take these beehives down and binge on the honey to the extent that honey comprises something around 20% of all their dietary calories. So bring honey back into prominence. There's also interesting research that it doesn't spike blood glucose like other forms of carbohydrate because it contains so many other cofactors, antioxidant benefits, and things that help the body process it effectively, as opposed to slurping down a Slurpee and getting that adverse effect on your metabolic system, blood sugar spike, insulin crash, that kind of thing. So, I have embraced this animal-based approach to eating more and more in recent years. And I mean, starting with the primal paleo transition that Mark Sisson and I helped communicate with the publication of the Primal Blueprint in 2009. That's when I stopped eating grains and processed sugars and things that had still were leaking in my diet until I embraced the ancestral inspired approach to eating and sticking to the foods that have fueled human evolution for 2 million years. And they are, if you have a notepad, you can write this down: meat, fish, fowl, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. That is what fueled human evolution for 2 million years. And those are the foods that can ideally fuel us today, picking and choosing from the list as I described to make sure that your sensitivities are taken care of. So, I appreciate the animal-based approach, the nutrient-dense approach as revealed by my chart, and also the importance of getting sufficient carbs to fuel your active, energetic lifestyle. And when you use the term carbs, we banter it about like all carbs are seemingly equal, especially when we disparage the presence of carbs in the diet or talk about the benefits of a low-carb diet. So we have to make a clear distinction between natural, nutritious carbs and the centerpiece of the modern diet, which are the nutrient deficient, heavily processed carbs, especially from the grain family. So when I am carefully selecting my nutritious carbs, I'm going with the honey, the fruit, and then enjoying the foods that I have minimal sensitivity to that I believe can enhance my enjoyment of my diet. So things like tortillas when I'm eating taqueria, or getting the fabulous fresh baked sourdough bread at the farmer's market, which goes stale in 3 to 4 days. So that is my checkpoint, my guideline for whether or not I will eat bread. I will only eat bread that goes stale in a few days. That is the real ticket. And this has much less objections in terms of digestibility versus the bread in the supermarket that lasts for what, 2 weeks probably before it starts to pick up mold. And that's because of all the chemicals and preservatives that also can irritate the gut lining and make that gluten intolerance even worse. I also have a huge dietary centerpiece of artisan bean to bar, high cacao percentage dark chocolate that I source my favorite brands from around the world, and I'll nibble on that frequently throughout the day. So I do get sufficient carbs. Someone asked me how many grams a day. I have no idea. In the old Primal Blueprint days, we used to talk about 150 grams a day or below was kind of a primal paleo template, and that's enough to give the brain what it needs. And then in terms of your exercise load, your exercise regimen, you would increase carbs in accordance with what you need to refuel glycogen efficiently. Okay, so I think the benefits of this ancestral diet and a restrictive approach to diet, if you are suffering right now from sensitivities and digestive irregularities, autoimmune or inflammatory conditions, cannot be understated, especially when we realize the medical system is trying to address symptoms of disease rather than attack the root cause. So I'd be really open-minded and dig further into this animal-based approach promoted by Dr. Saladino, especially if you're suffering. And he's a board certified physician, so he has a lot of experience dealing with actual clients and optimizing diet to help cure disease. There's a lot of interesting research connecting an animal-based eating approach to intervention for mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. Amber O'Hearn, one of the prominent leaders of the carnivore diet movement, contends that she neutralized her bipolar condition through dietary intervention to the extent that she has a lack of symptoms and a lack of medication. So that's some pretty serious stuff. And we do know that there's a strong connection between consumption of processed sugar and uh, conditions like ADHD and hyperactivity, anxiety, depression, things like that. So it's no joke when you fuel yourself with garbage, it will leak into the mental health space if you're not lucky. Furthering this thought about a nutrient-dense approach to eating, I love my previous podcast from Dr. Tommy Wood, and now we're going back a few years, but I really encourage you to go back and listen. I really think that those shows were one of the most sensible, easy to understand, and agreeable ways to acquaint yourself with the ancestral health movement, the progressive health movement, because Tommy is such a sensible guy and he never talks in absolutes or is extremely emphatic about this camp or that. He just wants people to be healthy. I asked him to give his top 5 list of most important health interventions, and he says things like surround yourself with a group of friends and have a good time once in a while, stuff like that. But he did have some great comments about um, the strategies of fasting, calorie restriction, time restricted feeding, uh, as applied to people who are active, energetic, and athletic. And he says, quote, total calorie expenditure still increases with increasing activity, and this is protective for many health circumstances. Those with the fastest metabolic rate, due to a greater uncoupling to maintain heat, uncoupling of mitochondria to maintain heat, live the longest. This contention by one of the smartest guys in the ancestral health space, he's a pediatric brain researcher at UW in Washington, flies in the face of some of this hype about fasting equals longevity movement. And people like Walter Longo, David Sinclair, and the $2 million man, Brian Johnson, arguing that if you restrict calories, you're going to live longer. Jay Feldman, also on my podcast 4 times, made a strong argument that all the longevity research equating calorie restriction with lifespan has been done on animals and not humans. And in fact, the only or the best known long-term study of calorie restriction on humans, called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, performed on conscientious objectors to World War II at the University of Minnesota in a metabolic ward where they controlled what they ate for weeks and months on end, was a huge disaster. And these guys' health was decimated with long-term, lifelong adverse mental health consequences too to their starvation. I guess they probably wish they had gone to war instead when they finally came out of the metabolic ward. Anyway, Dr. Tommy Wood says those with the fastest metabolic rate, those who run hotter, run a hotter engine, live the longest. Uh, and earlier in the day, calories will be better for most people because you're more insulin sensitive in the morning. Longer fasting periods will result in greater nitrogen loss, no matter how fat adapted you are. However, longer periodic fasts will certainly play an important role in long-term health. So what he's talking about is if you fast as a routine day after day after day, and you're trying to be active, energetic, and athletic, you are going to experience greater nitrogen loss. That's the role of protein in the body, whether you're in nitrogen balance or nitrogen loss. That determines whether you're anabolic or catabolic. You don't want to be in nitrogen loss if you're trying to build and maintain lean muscle mass throughout life. So even if you're a big time enthusiast of fasting, keto, time restricted feeding, and you're really fat adapted and you can manage throughout the busy morning without any calories, you're going to experience greater nitrogen loss by not eating for long periods. And then the parentheses that Tommy mentions is that once in a while, or whatever your pattern that you feel is optimal for you, like once a week or whatever, sure, you can go into a periodic fast and get those vaunted health benefits like autophagy. More comments from Tommy. In the absence of proper light cues, i.e., most modern people do not have proper light cues for their circadian rhythm, which would mean like getting up in the morning and exposing yourself to direct light as soon as you wake up, and also seeing the sunset every night, and also greatly minimizing your artificial light after dark so that you can align more with the rising and the setting of the sun. So, in the absence of proper light cues, as is the case for most modern people, food timing also provides the strongest Zeitgeber. That is a way of optimizing circadian rhythm. So you have a human circadian rhythm, the influence of the rising and setting in the sun, of the sun on your daily routine. And then you have a digestive circadian rhythm that helps sync with your overall circadian rhythm to help you go to sleep and have a good night's sleep and then wake up feeling refreshed and energized in the morning. So timing of food goes hand in hand with timing of being asleep and awake is the takeaway here. So food timing provides the strongest Zeitgeber. So breakfast probably becomes even more important in those eating a crappy diet and not getting enough sunlight. Great insights from Tommy Wood. And now we go to my podcasts with Dr. Robert Lustig and the title of his most recent book, Metabolical. He wants you to, in a nutshell, in a soundbite, find foods that, quote, protect the liver and feed the gut, end quote. And this would pretty much be the opposite of the what comprises the majority of the standard American diet, which is processed carbohydrates and processed fats, like the widely disparaged, highly refined industrial seed oils, and of course all the carbs, the grain-based foods and snacks and treats and meal centerpieces like muffins and waffles and pancakes in the morning that comprise so many calories but have minimal nutrition. They stress the liver, right? Because they spike blood sugar and prompt an insulin response, and you get insulin resistance when you're pumping out too much insulin too often. So stressing the liver and also compromising gut health and prompting inflammation in the gut and leaky gut syndrome. So when we find foods that protect the liver and feed the gut, we're talking about all the superstars of high fiber, low in processed carbohydrate. And so that's a good little guideline to go searching for the right foods. Here's another huge contention that Dr. Lustig made on my show. And I pinned him into the corner of his screen, if you will, and said, wait a second, are you going to stake your entire reputation and your life's work on this assertion? And he said, absolutely. You know what he said? He said, processed foods are the driving cause of obesity because they dysregulate appetite and they harm your satiety mechanisms, prompting you to overeat. And he said, quote, you simply will not get fat if you eliminate processed foods, end quote. What? Are you kidding me? Wait a second. Can't I get fat if I eat 12 eggs in the morning and 4 steaks in the afternoon and 6 bowls of blueberry for a mid-morning snack? And he said, nope, because what happens when you eat these nutrient-dense foods, these natural, nutritious, nutrient-dense foods, is you optimize your appetite and satiety mechanisms such that you're full. You do not want a 4th steak after you enjoy the first 3 on a dare from Brad Kearns on the B.rad podcast saying that you can't get fat eating natural, nutritious foods. Whew, I've shared this with a lot of people. I remember Mark Bell telling me point blank, oh yeah, I can get fat on steaks, hamburgers, and pineapples and eggs and what have you. But the point is taken very strongly from Dr. Lustig that we are now seeing from many other voices too, I'm hearing this now, that it's not just that Americans are consuming more of these nasty high sugar foods and seed oils and not exercising enough. Because guess what? We've been doing that for like 50 years. you go back to the 70s, we were having hot fudge sundaes and popping open glass bottles of Coke and chowing down the Coke throughout our youths. And, we weren't in these highly refined dietary strategies like we are today with these natural uh, supermarkets full of, of the top, organic and highly scrutinized foods. No, we were slamming down a lot of stuff. However, the escalation of food chemistry and food processing over the past 50 years, the dramatically increased consumption of high fructose corn syrup, for example, and I remember seeing one graph on the internet, maybe we can find it with good show notes, where there was the correlation between the rise in consumption of high fructose corn syrup and the rise in obesity rates. Because as we talk about in the book Born to Walk and the running boom, the obesity rate in the United States back in 1973 was something like 8%. And now, as you know, it's a third Americans obese and two-thirds are overweight and outside of healthy body composition. So that's a huge difference between, a very small sliver of the population in that category of obese, where now it's routine and commonplace. So what's the difference? If we weren't exercising much back in the 70s either, it's not like we slowed down and left the gyms behind in modern times. In fact, we're probably a large section of society is exercising vastly more than the average back in the 70s. So we're exercising the same or maybe better. We have access to better foods, and we're getting fatter and fatter, and that's going to go possibly right into the blame category of the chemicals, the other agents besides the total calorie count, right? So eating a Twinkie is a bad deal because it's 220 calories or whatever of poor nutrition, but over and above that, it is causing you to have a adverse metabolic response inside your body. Jay Feldman talks about this too, where the chemically processed nutrient deficient foods prompt the release of endotoxin in the digestive tract. Endotoxin is an internally manufactured toxin that interferes with your ability to burn energy internally. You can't burn body fat well when you chow down French fries full of seed oils and other processed foods that prompt the release of lipopolysaccharide is the name of the endotoxin that wreaks havoc on your own metabolism. So, love Dr. Lustig's assertion, you can't get fat if you eliminate processed foods. Then we go to Jay Feldman, who I mentioned a couple times, and a quote from some of his great writing on his website, uh, jayfeldmanwellness.com. If we were to evaluate the use of interventions like ketogenic diets, calorie restriction, or intermittent fasting, we would see that they're generally a terrible idea because they're disastrous for energy production, end quote. In other words, restricting calories uh, he believes, and a lot of science to back everything he says. That's what I love about his work is he's always referencing the research and the literature. When we restrict energy, we engage in an assortment of compensatory mechanisms to slow things down, run a little bit colder, be a little lazier on account of deciding to fast in the morning rather than to wake up and eat some nutrient dense foods. It goes back to what Tommy Wood's saying. And I mentioned this quote in another show. Besides his people living the longest with the faster metabolic rate, he also says that he advises his healthy, athletic, energetic clients to eat as much nutritious food as possible every day until they gain a pound of fat and then dial it back a little bit. What an interesting take on that. So that kind of puts a squash on this fascination with fasting, time restricted feeding, carb restriction, calorie restriction. Jay Feldman, terrible idea. Pretty strong words there. Instead, Jay encourages us to strive for maximum cellular energy status in the mode of eat more, move more. And this goes right hand in hand with my new longevity mantra of perform, recover. Again, we are talking to an audience of those who are active, athletic, and energetic, and not trapped in this state of energy toxicity. That's a term popularized by Dr. Lane Norton, and it comprises the overall condition of storing too many calories and burning too few calories, not living an active, energetic lifestyle. And I said storing instead of eating because the body processes calories in a different way. Not all calories are created equal. So if you consume a bunch of Twinkies, you're going to store more energy, including your own body fat. Remember, if you release lipopolysaccharide, you're going to interfere with fat burning. Same with consuming refined industrial seed oils. Dr. Kate Shanahan talks about how they hamper your ability to burn fat and they tend to stay inside the body rather than be burned for fuel, which perhaps a natural nutritious source of fat might be eaten, you store it, and then the next day you burn it kind of thing. Easy peasy. Not when you're consuming these chemicals and processed agents. So we're getting a lot in here, and I think uh, I think I'll keep going and get to the finish line and cover a few more um, highlighted guests. But Jay's stuff is really nicely layered up there with Dr. Tommy Woods too. So um, understand that there are tons of other stressors in life. This is Jay talking again. So why trigger stress mechanisms even though they deliver health benefits? This is probably amalgamation of Jay's comments and my notes about Jay's comments from my shows. What he means is when you are engaging in ketogenic eating pattern with extreme carb restriction or time restricted feeding, these are prompting stress mechanisms in the body. That is the way that the benefits are achieved. So when you fast and starve your cells of energy, your cells work more efficiently and you upregulate repair processes like the highly regarded autophagy. However, there's all kinds of other ways that you are prompting stress mechanisms in the body, and so you have to take these all as a whole and perhaps put the brakes on some of these restrictive dietary strategies. All the health boosting survival triggered responses like anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, cell repair, and a clean burning fuel source for the brain when it comes to the ketogenic diet, we must reflect on these that they are stress responses. And then, of course, have a net overall impact when considered with the other stress factors in your life. I think the most powerful way to convey this or to understand this big picture insight is when you realize that intense exercise and fasting are sailing on parallel tracks to deliver the same purported health benefits. Mike Mutzel made a great point on his YouTube video about this, where the research shows that autophagy peaks after 48 hours of fasting. So if you starve yourself for 48 hours, you get this wonderful renewal benefit in your organs. And isn't that great? And indeed, it's all scientifically validated. But he also mentions that an intense 1 hour workout in the gym also depletes cellular energy and prompts a powerful autophagy response to the extent that it is comparable to a 48-hour fast. So it's your choice. You can starve yourself for 48 hours or go slam an hour workout in the gym and get a similar health boosting autophagy benefits. Okay. Jay also makes an interesting point that the beneficial effects of restrictive diets, like those mentioned, are incidental, not direct. So, when you fast, for example, and experience a weight loss benefit, it's not because of the magic of not eating for many hours in the morning. It's because you get a default reduction in excess calorie consumption because you told yourself you're not going to eat anything until 12 noon. Oh, and you say that your digestive tract feels better because you fast every morning and you just feel so much better and you don't have gas bloating, indigestion anymore. That is also an incidental benefit, not a direct benefit. So the incidental benefit is that you're not putting offensive foods into your digestive tract every morning. However, in contrast, if you were to prepare a B.rad Superfuel high protein smoothie with frozen fruit, I like to put bananas and dates in there. These are by and large non-offensive foods to consume that won't prompt an adverse digestive reaction in very, very many people at all, especially when you talk about the ultra high quality whey protein, grass-fed whey protein isolate that we use in superfuel. A lot of quote whey protein end quote on the market can cause irritation in sensitive people because it's largely what you see is whey protein concentrate, which is a cheaper and less pure form of whey protein. So if you're going to take something in supplement form, I encourage you to get the very best, highest quality, highest potency, least objectionable form. And our whey protein isolate from grass-fed cattle in America, traced to the source, is around 95% pure, as opposed to whey protein concentrate, which can be 70 to 85% pure. What's left over? Lactose, which many people are very sensitive to, as well as milk fat. And when you talk about our whey protein isolate being 95% pure, what's left over largely is moisture and minerals. Again, not offensive. So if you're claiming that your fasting is the key to minimizing gut irritation, just realize that it's the incidental benefit of not eating crappy stuff that you're sensitive to. Okay, so this idea that it's all about energy toxicity as the main problem is a little controversial, but it makes sense. And also, when Dr. Lane Norton asserts that any intervention that corrects adverse metabolic values brings a huge benefit, that is also true. But again, we have to be nuanced with our approach because we're real humans and we have issues like our mental health as it relates to diet and our ability to sustain it and actually enjoy our experience in life rather than doing what we're supposed to do like a robot. And I'm referring to there's this phenomenon called the Twinkie diet or the potato diet where people have lost 20 pounds of body weight in 6 weeks by only eating russet potatoes every meal. What's the trick? What's the magic there? Is that pretty soon you're going to have enough potatoes and you're not going to want a fourth one, even though you're kind of in this starvation mode and you're losing weight very quickly. It really does work. And in fact, any way that you can correct adverse metabolic values like an elevated blood sugar, elevated insulin, excess body fat, high triglycerides, that is going to be a net health benefit by any means necessary, even the potato diet or even the Twinkie diet. However, where are you going to be 6 weeks from now? You're going to have better blood work. Congratulations, you did it. You're awesome. Now, how are you going to live the rest of your life? Those are the big picture questions that I think get pushed aside when Lane is yelling at us with his Instagram posts. And nothing against his yelling and his performance and his theatrics and the good points that he's making, also steeped in scientific research. But I want to have a really reasonable conversation, especially for people who aren't immersed in this day and night, like perhaps I am, and perhaps many of the people that you listen to that have big platforms. So we have to be reasonable, sensible, and understand that we're talking to real people with busy lives that might not be able to adhere to a russet potato diet for 6 weeks or what have you. Okay. So a little bit more, a couple more tidbits, and then we are out with some of the great highlights from many years of B.rad podcast talking about diet. I talked about that overall stress impact of your dietary strategies, knowing that fasting, keto, carb restriction, time restricted feeding triggers stress mechanisms. We talk about hormetic stressors being brief natural stressors that have a net positive benefit. But Jay writes a two-part article on his website, jfeldmanwellness.com, about hormesis. I encourage you to read those. They're fantastic. And he makes the argument that the effects of stress are cumulative. So what does that mean? In the example of, let's say, cold plunging, yes, a 30-second or a 2-minute immersion into cold water is a highly stressful fight or flight event. But when you get out, the overall stress impact is minimal, but you do trigger these immediate positive natural health benefits like anti-inflammatory, immune boosting, testosterone boosting, and so forth. But if you were, for example, to engage in a ritual of going into your cold tub 4 times a day for the next 40 years, we do not know. We can guess that that might have a net overall adverse health effect because life is so stressful in total. So all of your hormetic stressors, your hormetic behaviors must be factored into the big picture. That's how I came up with my mantra of perform, recover, perform, recover. I want the vast majority of my stress mechanisms directed toward performing in my workouts and recovering from them and minimizing all other forms of stress that I introduce into my life. Okay, I want to have a little pie slice dedicated to the lawsuit that I'm immersed in right now. I want to concentrate on that, get pissed once in a while, get a nice strategic response with my lawyer, and then go about my busy day and my next important workout, right? But it's a really important point to make when we look at the big picture of life and a refutation of this idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. In fact, the truth for a human, what doesn't kill you might kill you slowly over time. And a great quip that Jay made on the show, he said, "Look, no one ever says that a argument with your partner is a hormetic benefit, right? It's just an argument. It sucks. Who wants to do that? But it does elicit the same fight or flight response as a period of fasting or a jump in the cold tub or a high intensity workout. So the benefits uh, are incidental rather than specific. Okay. Um, for example, you put your muscle under load and the muscle grows back stronger. But when you tear muscle fibers in the course of your workout patterns, like running downhill, and you think that it has any benefit whatsoever, this is Jay's contention that that's absolutely wrong. It's in spite of the damage, you are building back and getting stronger muscles, and that will give you a net positive benefit. But it's not because you ran hard downhill and slammed your quads into the cement. What's the takeaway point there? The takeaway point is that if you combine a high intensity workout with repeated prolonged fasting for the first part of every day, and then we zoom out to a 6 month view or a 12-month view, we could argue that this is an excessive amount of stress, and you'd be maybe better off striving for maximum cellular energy status as you go through your busy, active, athletic day. Final quote from Jay: Hormesis would be best characterized as an extreme misrepresentation of the interaction between the organism and its environment. Now I have two more highlights. One of them is from Sean Askinosie, the founder and proprietor of Askinosie chocolate, some of the best you'll ever find in the world. I love his 88% bar. It's definitely in my top five. Askinosie, ASKINOSIE.com. And he gave a full treatise on the state of the economy of cacao farming on the planet. And some important takeaways that I want you to remember. He says if you buy a commercial chocolate bar for whatever, $2.50 or $3, you are most certainly supporting child slave labor in Africa. Thank you. This show is not sponsored by Hershey's, Nestle, Snickers, or Milky Way. So if you're buying a commodity chocolate bar from a major brand, there is no way that they can sell that bar for that price without ripping off the farmers and also exploiting labor, which is so common in the poorly regulated African nations. So no longer smile at the discounted bars you're buying for Halloween and giving out to kids in your neighborhood. You're supporting child slave labor as you give these cute little kids their bite-sized Milky Way or Snickers. A quality artisan bean-to-bar chocolate bar made from a trusted manufacturer. And you can look for this term. Bean to bar means that the manufacturer of the bar, like Askinosie, got the beans shipped in a gunny sack from equatorial regions where only place where cacao is grown, and they roasted and harvested the the beans themselves and made it into the final form of chocolate. Most bars are not like that. And the way you can tell at a glance is look at the ingredient list of the chocolate bar you're buying. Unfortunately, even in prestigious stores like Whole Foods Market, the vast majority of their dark chocolate offerings are not qualifying for this fair trade bean to bar distinction. Instead, when you look on the label and the ingredient list, you'll see terms like chocolate liqueur or chocolate or dark chocolate. This is the indication that they are working with a commodity giant barrel of chocolate that they purchased on the commodity market and then stamped their logo onto the little square of the chocolate bar, as opposed to what you want to see on your chocolate bar. In the ingredient list, the first ingredient is cacao beans. That means they started with the beans. They were traced to origin. A lot of times you will see imprinted on the wrapper a fair trade designation, meaning that they paid the farmer a fair price. The farmer's not utilizing child slave labor to undercut. They have a quality control. What happens mostly in the chocolate world, as described by Askinosie, and I've had a couple other guests talking about this too, Torreya Rodriguez, that they indiscriminately harvest the beans just to make more profit, just like with many other products that we see in the food economy. And they even include rotten beans that would taste terrible. However, they roast the shit out of them so that you can't really discern that potential terrible taste. And then the more sugar and milk you dump into the chocolate bar, so you transition from dark chocolate over to milk chocolate by the percentage of sugar and milk in the product, then of course the nasty original beans are going to be masked. And that's essentially what you're getting when you bite into your Snickers bar or Milky Way, a commodity product, child slave labor, roasted the crap out of these beans that were of unknown quality and unknown origin, but very likely to be from the poorly regulated African nations that are undercutting the real farmers, as opposed to a dark chocolate bar. And the percentage that you see on the label indicates the percentage of cacao versus sugar into the bar. So 100% chocolate bar for those really refined connoisseurs only will have no sugar and be completely dark chocolate, and then you're going down. And by and large, anything over 70 or 72 or 75% is a common choice for these artisan bean to bar makers where you're getting a good quality dark chocolate bar. It's not so bitter that it's abrupt to your taste buds, but I've habituated definitely over time to prefer 80 to 88% range, and I'll once in a while have a 100% bar just for fun and appreciation. Okay, so that is the great takeaways from Sean Askinosie. I was so inspired by my guests on chocolate and my fascination with chocolate that I have a free PDF download that you can find on bradkearns.com called The Dark Chocolate Connoisseur's Guide to Dark Chocolate. So sign up on the homepage, put your email in. You'll get our wonderful newsletter as well, and then you'll be able to download numerous PDFs, including the Dark Chocolate Connoisseur's Guide. Finally, I love the comments from Dr. Ted Naiman about his concept of protein to energy ratio. And what he describes here, and many people have variations of this that they're using, describing, taking credit for. So it's this insight that the body has a natural, deep-seated biological drive to survive, and its most prominent dietary need is to consume sufficient protein. To support the building blocks of the body, as you've often heard, support of course, the familiar example of having the muscles recover from athletic fitness exercise, but also to support the functioning of all the organs and systems in the body. You need dietary protein, especially the essential amino acids, which you can only get from diet. And so we have this deep, deep craving for protein that drives our dietary habits. We will continue to consume food. We will continue to be hungry until our protein needs are met. What does that mean when you are reaching in the bag of potato chips or ice cream, which are both around 5% protein, the other 95% being a combination of sugar and fat, which many nutrition and food experts contend that this modern technique of combining sugar and fat creates the most indulgent and perhaps addictive foods. And so if you look into the categories of your favorite go-to treats, like I love popcorn drizzled with extra virgin olive oil, flavored lemon or lime, my favorite. So we're talking about the fat from the oil, the carbs from the popcorn. Ice cream, of course, is a combination of carbohydrates from the sugar and cream from the fat. We have cheesecake. We have pancakes with butter lathered on them, and so many other examples of combining carbs and fat together to provide that gustatory pleasure. But underneath all that, buried underneath, is this biological drive to survive and to get enough protein. Therefore, when we reach for those chips or that scoop of ice cream that often becomes a second or third scoop, it's because deep down, we're just trying to get the protein we need. And so, to get our daily protein needs met through chips and ice cream, we're going to have 7 bags of chips and a half a gallon of ice cream. Then, on the other side, the protein to energy ratio is the more efficient the food is at meeting that deep-seated biological drive for protein, the more satiating it is. And the research backs this up, that actually protein is the most satiating macronutrient, not fat, protein. So, you design your diet with the protein to energy ratio in mind, and that will help you optimize body composition. As for most of us in the modern world, we are struggling to manage our caloric consumption with our energy output so we don't steadily and irreversibly gain weight throughout our lives. The average American gains 1.5 pounds per year, and average American gains a pound a year, which represents gaining a pound and a half of fat and losing a half pound of muscle from ages 25 to 65. That's a pretty disastrous stat, but that is the average. Think about it. You put on 40 pounds since high school, let's say. It's pretty much the norm these days. And that 40 pounds is not solid muscle, of course. It's lower muscle mass and way more fat. So to counteract against this, you have a protein-centric animal-based diet, as I mentioned at the outset, and that is a winning ticket. So when you surround yourself with these high satiety, highly nutritious foods, the meat, fish, fowl, and eggs, right? That is going to give you tremendous dietary satisfaction. You're going to meet your protein needs, and then you can consume natural, nutritious sources of carbohydrate or fat to your liking and to your energetic needs, whether you decide to get the vast majority from carbs, or whether you're on a low carb diet and you want to get the vast majority of your additional energetic needs from fat. We do have some baseline biological requirements for essential fatty acids, and as many low carbers spout, you don't really need to eat carbohydrates. The human can survive without carbohydrates, but certainly can't thrive. So that biological fact aside, I think the best suggestion is to optimize carbohydrate intake according to your daily activity level and your hormonal needs. And that's going to be emphasizing the natural, nutritious sources of carbohydrates that are minimally offensive, easy to digest, as I talked about at the outset with the comments from Saladino that kicked off the show and our podcast back in 2019. So again, to wrap up, we have Dr. Paul Saladino launching the carnivore movement with Dr. Sean Baker and other former podcast guests, and then coming around to now this nuanced approach where it's an animal-based, protein-centric, nutrient-dense, fully fueled diet. Dr. Tommy Wood weighing in, reminding us that those with the fastest metabolic rate live the longest. So you want to run warm, run active, and be fully fueled. Dr. Robert Lustig saying that you can't get fat if you eliminate processed foods. Wow. And Jay Feldman, energy balance, going into this idea that restrictive diets prompt stress mechanisms in the body, and we want to count all stress together in the big picture and not overdo it there. Askinosie with the chocolate. Strive for artisan bean to bar dark chocolate. Look on the label for cacao beans as the first ingredients, and stop supporting child slave labor in Africa by consuming mainstream commodity products from the major brands. And finally, Dr. Ted Naiman, the protein to energy ratio. So you want to emphasize nutritious, high protein foods in the diet. That's going to leave you with excellent satiety and appetite regulation, as well as meeting those basic biological drives. Thank you so much for listening. I think this was a really important show, and I would love for you to share it with other people that you care about that want to have a good, big picture, quick insights, especially about the world of ancestral eating and managing some of these conflicting and confusing ideas that are coming out. And I want to be really sensible about it and have you go out there and enjoy your life, enjoy your meals, and be fully fueled and optimized. Send me some questions, comments, podcast@bradventures.com. Thank you so much for listening, watching.